Hello and welcome back to the chess website. This is Justin, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different kind of video. Instead of going over some openings or going over some chess general information, we're actually going to be looking at some pretty recent games and going to be talking about some recent developments in the world of chess. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about this kind of video and if you guys have any suggestions for videos we could do in the future. We just want to help provide a great learning environment for you. So thanks for watching. Let's get right into it. So the games and what I'm going to talk about today is the modern chess opening. So recently in the US Women's Championship, Carissa Yip, who is a very strong player, rated 2370 and an international master. She played the modern defense against multiple of her opponents, who were also very, very strong masters. So the modern opening is considered to be kind of a bad opening. It starts after e4 and then g6. So instead of playing for the center right away, Black is just kind of playing on the side of the board, not really trying to do anything with the center. It's a really interesting approach, and this is called the modern because this is kind of a modern way of playing chess. It was a modern way of playing chess because, again, instead of fighting for the center right away, it's inviting white to take over the center and basically saying, all right, you can have the center, but I'm going to fight back and I'm going to be able to retake the center. So this game does a great job of showing how the modern works and how black can actually chip away at the center and slowly take it back under its own control. So after white gains all of the space in the center, it looks like white is just dominating this opening. Black plays a strange looking move, a6. This looks really weird. Like, what is a6 doing? How does that help black's position? But after knight f3, Carissa plays b5, and we see a little bit of the idea here. Carissa wants to play bishop to b7, attacking and pressuring this e4 pawn, and then play b4, which would undermine the defender of this e4 pawn. So a very strange looking idea, but the idea again is to undermine the center with the modern. So white plays bishop to d3, solidifying that center, bishop to b7, and black's pieces look pretty good. These bishops are doing a great job of controlling and fighting for the center, even though black has 0 pawns in the center and is very cramped as far as their space. So white wants to take advantage of black's kind of lack of following the opening principles, and white plays e5. This is generally a good idea if your opponent is not following the opening principles. You want to open things up. You want to punish them for it. So after e5, Carissa says, okay, well, you're just overextending, right? You've pushed all these pawns in the center, but you're actually just weakening your position because pawns can't go backwards. So Carissa strikes with c5. And now there's all of this tension in the center. So many sides, so many captures are possible here. But the bottom line is after all of these captures, so for instance, white takes here, and then black actually takes on e5. And the idea here is that this knight cannot take because that would hang this g2 pawn all the way back here, and then white would have a hard time castling. So after d takes e5, white just castles, and that allows the center to already just be evaporated. White had 3 pawns in the center just a few moves ago, and all of a sudden it's gone. So this is the power, and this is the idea of the modern, is to fight back against that strong center and try to undermine it slowly and chip away at it. So um, that's really what I want to emphasize, and this idea of the modern way of playing chess, which is to allow your opponent to get the center and then fight back and say, you've overextended, you can't move those pawns backwards. Um, so the rest of this game is really interesting to look at, but essentially, Black just plays pretty normal moves. This move, Queen C8, is a little odd, but the idea is just we're gonna be able to take back with the queen if you take on c6, and that's just what happens. Um, and then a few moves go by, just normal developing moves. And if we see a few moves go on from here, we see that all of a sudden, Black has completely flipped the script. Instead of White dominating the center, now Black is. There's just complete domination of the center by Black. The bishop and the queen work beautifully along this long diagonal, completely unchallenged, and these pawns do a great job of controlling important central squares. So, we can kind of see the strength of the modern here and why the center is so strong because now that Black has the center and White had overextended, White really can't challenge Black center. They don't have any pawn breaks because their pawns had already moved. So they can't play a move like d4 and try to, you know, fight back at the center because they don't have a d pawn. They already pushed it. Like it's gone. So it's a really interesting way of playing chess, and this is becoming more and more popular for a few reasons. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But Carissa went on to win this game very, very smoothly. And it's just very, very impressive how she did this. Just completely let her opponent from the start just dominate the center. And she fought back and was able to chip it away and very, very quickly just completely relieve all of White's central control. So I'll look at a few more moves. It's not really that important, but just the two bishops here, and Black is up in exchange and a ton of material, two pawns as well. Has even with all that material, Black has really nice control of the center, so White really has nothing to play for at this point. And the game ends uh, pretty shortly after this. It's already like -5. So it's crazy to start from a position like this, where White just has everything they could want, to a few moves later, Black having complete domination over the position and White having no counterplay at all. It's really fascinating how this modern way of playing chess can work. And Carissa used this multiple times in this tournament with very, very good success. And this game against Anna Zatonsky, a very strong player, 2360, she used this strategy again. It started with d4, so a little bit different, but it ended up being very similar because after knight to f6, she just went g6. Again, she's not putting any pawns in the center. She's allowing her opponents to take the center and then fighting back and chipping away at that center. So after g6, knight to d2, again, playing a move like d5 here makes a ton of sense. It just stops e4, stakes its claim in the center, but Carissa wants no part of that. She's just saying, "I'm going to give you the center," and White does it, and it's very, very interesting the way she's playing this, and just getting a very unbalanced position where she's going to have chances to play for the win. So after this, she plays knight to c6, and then e5. This is her chipping away at the center. She finally breaks through in the center, and if White were to play a move like d5 here, Black would just play knight to e7. They would move this knight to like h5 and play f5, and they would still have a lot of ways to chip away at this overextended center that White has. So c6 is also another break. It's just very fascinating how sometimes taking the center and putting all of your pawns in the center can actually be a bad thing. Um, and if you play principled chess, it shouldn't be. But at this top level, where these very strong players really understand the game of chess. It's very fascinating to see how they just let their opponents take the center. So in this position, the center is pretty even. But this modern way of playing chess with this g6, the bishop g7, like she was happy to just let her opponent take over the center, and then all of a sudden now the center is pretty much under her control. It's pretty even, but as Black, this is perfectly fine. So queen e2, h6. I'm not gonna go too in depth with the game itself, but I did just want to show and emphasize how the opening allowed her to get an unbalanced position. Now, there's a lot of light squares around White's king that are weak, and that allows her to create a very strong attack. So she goes h5, really just going after White's king. And Queen f2, and then she brings all of her pieces into the game. Bishop h6. And here, funnily enough, Bishop h6 was actually a blunder. Very, very difficult to see why. Queen c5 is the way to punish this because both c7 and e5 are weak, especially e5. E5 is an important pawn, and apparently this is like +3. Very difficult for a human to understand, especially with all of Black's pieces pointing towards the king and nothing defending it from White's side. But just Bishop f1 is coming, and that's going to kick the queen out, and that should be enough. But regardless, Bishop f1 comes, the queen retreats, and then h4. Black is just breaking through. Black is doing everything it can to break away at White's position. And then g takes h4, and now Black wants to get their rooks into the game, so they do that by playing king to g7, and they're going to swing their rook all the way around to h8 and try to mop up this h4 pawn. So knight g2, a very passive move. White should have been a little bit more aggressive, and that kind of allowed Carissa to play a move like knight h5 and improve her pieces. This knight can head to f4 in a lot of positions where it's going to be very well placed. Bishop to b5, the rook goes to h8, which was her plan all along, and then bishop c4, the queen goes to f6. All of Black's pieces, again, are pointing towards White's king, and after queen c5, bishop h3, it's just collapsing. We'll see a few more moves. Queen e7, queen takes f3, and that queen is really causing a lot of problems for White. White takes on e5 a check, then plays bishop to f1. But here, just the move knight to f4 is good enough um, to win, because after this move, taking on f4 would not be a great idea since bishop takes f4. It's going to come followed by bishop to e3. And, attacking this queen is also a pretty big deal. So that's a pretty big threat. And you're also just threatening to take on g2. So rook to d2, and you just take on g2. Rook takes g2, knight h3 check. And now king to h1 is forced. And here Carissa played bishop to e3, just slowly suffocating that white king. And then after queen takes c7, knight f2 check, king to g1, and see if you can find the finish here. Carissa played knight to d1 check, and here Anna Zatonsky resigned because this is a discovered check, and more importantly, it cuts off the connection between this rook and the bishop. So once the king moves, queen takes f1 is going to lead to mate because there's no protection of that bishop. So really interesting opening, and to see how Carissa uses opening to just get some random positions where Black is going to have a fighting chance. Her opponent is not going to be familiar. She's going to be uncomfortable. And it led to a huge tournament for her and a great success. So the modern was really revived by Carissa Yip in this tournament. A very interesting approach to what seemed to be a dead opening, and it's got a lot of bonuses. It surprises your opponents, it puts them in your territory. And there's really not a lot of memorization. If you just kind of understand the ideas of trying to break down the center, there's a lot of ways you can go about it, but you really don't need to memorize anything. And the last part, which is a lot of the appeal of the modern chess opening, is it's dynamic. It's not just boring. It's not the Berlin defense. It's not a forced draw in 20 moves, especially at the highest level. It's a dynamic position. It's going to get you a position where all three results are possible, and there's a lot of chess left to be played. So the modern chess opening is a really fascinating revelation that was recently introduced to the top chess world by Carissa Yip. And let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.